Morning, everybody, and you're very welcome to Teagasc Hedgerow Week 2021. My name is Catherine Keena, Teagasc Countryside Management Specialist, and this is the third year of Hedgerow Week. Last year, we were forced to go virtual, and this resulted in an enormous bank of valuable material, video clips and joint media articles with experts on almost every aspect of hedges. And this year, we're building on this by having a panel discussion using this bank of material in order to try to understand hedges better, which is the theme of Teagasc Hedgerow Week this year. On Monday, we discussed the state of Ireland's hedgerows, which is very relevant to today's discussion, and the news wasn't good. Overall, the conclusion was we're lucky to have the network of 689,000 kilometres of hedges. There's huge potential for the future, but the scary part is up to 90% in the surveys done have been classified as unfavourable condition. The topic today is hedge cutting, and in the panel are Tony Mullins from Ballybeg, Mitchelstown, County Cork, a dairy farmer who cuts his own hedges, probably a minority because most hedges are cut by contractors. We have Liam Herlihy from Brewery, County Limerick, who is also a dairy farmer but does cut hedges as a contractor as well. We have Paraic O'Brien from Cahir, a full-time hedge cutting contractor in Tipperary. Des Roy Cunningham in Carrickmacross, County Monaghan, again hedge cutting contractors. Aine O'Connell, IFA Dairy Policy Executive. Denis Drennan, ICMSA, a dairy farmer as well in Kilkenny. And Susan Callaghan, NPWS Divisional Ecologist. Good morning, all.
Good morning, Catherine.
In the background, making everything happen and working miracles at times is our own Yvonne Maher from Teagasc. I will now introduce and hand over to my co-host for today's session, the expert on machinery, Francis Quigley, Teagasc Machinery Specialist. So over to you, Francis.
Thanks very much, Catherine. Look, as Catherine has mentioned, we have a fantastic stock of videos there, and we're going to go now to one of our first videos, and in this clip, Padraig McCormack will give us some guidance on the recommended way to cut the different types of hedges that we will find commonly on our farms.
My name is Padraig McCormack. I'm Dairy Advisor in Moorpark, and we are here on the farm of Tony Mullins. What we advise farmers on hedge cutting depends on the hedge type. So firstly, any escaped hedges which grow up into a line of trees, we would advise to trim side only and not to top. And secondly, for any hedges that have been topped, we would advise to let them grow up to a height of 1.5 metres or up to the height that the hedge cutter can reach. And also we would advise to leave a thorn sapling in each hedge to grow up to a thorn tree. So for derogation farmers and derogation, that means at least one in every 300 metres.
My name is Tony Mullins. We're farming here in Mitchelstown with my wife Noel. We're predominantly dairy farm, and we're rearing all the calves to beef and as dairy replacements. We're a derogation farm. I like hedges on the farm. I suppose they're a great source of shelter for animals. They're shelter for the birds. They're a food source and a nesting habitat for birds, and you've the small mammals that live in the hedges as well. I suppose they're important as well for water. In times of heavy rainfall, that they can slow down the flow of water, and a good source of food in the autumn time for the birds with all the berries. And I've always had a keen interest in managing our own hedgerows. Look, our hedges are like our shop window. Our farm, to have it aesthetically pleasing is important, and look, the consumer is looking for biodiversity now and sustainability. I think going forward, that's the way we'll have to manage our hedgerows.
So, look, Paraic gave us some great advice there on dealing with, I suppose, the different types of hedges we come across on the farm. Look, Paraic mentioned, the topped hedge, and he also mentioned, we'll say, the tall or the escaped hedge. I'm just going to go to Catherine now. Catherine, can you tell us, why it's so important that we consider, both hedge types and why we deal with them, I suppose, separately?
Thanks, Francis. And while I speak, I'm just going to show this slide because I think this is a summary of all the effort we've been putting in and talking to all the experts. The most important thing is to understand there's basically two types of hedges. All our hedges, as you drive along, fall into either an escaped hedge, which can be tall, 20, 30, 40 feet high, containing mature trees. In that picture, it's whitethorn, but it can be ash and oak and whatever. We call them escaped hedges, on top tree lines, linear woodland, whatever we like to say, escaped hedges, which need to be side trimmed only. And then the ones we probably talk more about when we're talking about hedge cutting are the topped hedges. And they need to be trimmed to a triangular profile, if possible, from a wide base, sloping the sides. But it is important to top the growing point, or otherwise they will turn into an escaped hedge. We want them at least 1.5 meters, 5 foot high as the hedge cutter can reach to top that growing point, to stop it turning into the escaped hedge. And we must retain flowering thorns there to provide, and they will provide the buckets of fruit and flowers. Two hedge types, ideally we want both types on every farm, or at least in every area, in every townland. Both have different values. And I suppose my message is we do not top escaped hedges and do not let topped hedges escape. That's my summary, and I suppose the whole emphasis on today is to engage with the stakeholders who can make this happen, and maybe help us to help how this can happen, Francis. So that's my question today to all speaking, is how do we achieve, this kind of how do we get simple messages out for this?
That's great. Thanks, Catherine. And we're going to go to our next video now, which is how I cut my hedges. So this is Tony, one of our guests.
I've always had a keen interest in managing our own hedgerows. We have topped hedges on the farm. The management of those was we'd trim them annually, roadside hedges especially. But we would have kept down a bit lower in the past. We've increased the height that we're cutting them at now. I think as long as you can have a hedge at 8-9 feet, you have a good decent boundary. Even from a security point of view, I suppose in the past we've left up hardwood trees, native hardwoods like the ash and the oak, anywhere that they'd be in the hedge. Recently now we've started letting up whitethorns, and I suppose it is one of the terms of the derogation now is that you're supposed to leave up a thorn bush every 300 metres or so. I suppose some farmers you talk to think that tall hedges would affect grass growth or whatever. I find that they'd actually help grass growth, that they're a break to harsh wind in the early spring, and the shelter effect of a tree is multiplied many times out the field. I suppose on southerly facing hedges, you have a sheltering effect, where they get very high, but animals like that for shade as well in the high summer. They'll go there to lie down, to get away from the sun as well.
That's great. Tony, I might ask you to turn on your camera and microphone there. I found that very interesting, but particularly drawn to the advantages that that you see in the tall hedges you have on the farm. I know a lot of farmers out there would think the tall hedges would be probably maybe a disadvantage, maybe with boughs hanging out and getting caught in maybe the cab of the tractor and things like that. is this something that you would see as a problem on the farm? And I suppose the other thing is, do you find it hard? You cut your own hedges. Do you find it hard to cut those tall hedges?
Good morning, Francis. Firstly, I'd like to compliment yourself and Catherine there on the work you're doing for the hedgerows and the awareness you're creating around the whole subject. With regard to the high hedges, we don't find them an issue at all. If there was a hedge becoming an issue, we'd get in the Moffat saw just to trim the sides, maybe every 10 or 12 years. You might just get a run around and gather up the few tops that he'd knock off. But in general, 3 to 4 runs, in general, 3 runs of the hedge cutter will go, we'll say 12, 14, 16 feet. That's not going to interfere with any kind of machinery if they're trimmed back to that level. And once you start trimming them, it is very easy, to keep them in check, that you won't have overhanging bushes knocking off machinery and, interfering with mirrors and whatnot. I haven't any complaints from the contractors that do work here anyway. They're all quite happy with the state of the hedges. So I think we'll keep doing what we're doing. And as regards the top hedges, we'd be keeping those at around 8 or 9 feet, something that you can kind of judge at eye level there from the cab of the tractor. Generally 8 or 9 feet is what we'd have them at, and we're leaving up the white thorn saplings there now with a number of years, and those will be bearing fruit there now from now on. And another aspect of hedge management that we'd have here on this farm would be, we'd probably on field boundaries where they would have always been topped off the 4 sides of every field, we're leaving up as one of the hedges now, maybe as a shared boundary between 2 fields, where you have one hedge left grow up, as a policy here now.
Okay, and I suppose when we talk about the tall hedge, yours is actually tall and narrow, so it's actually grown along the width of the hedge, is not necessarily grown out. I suppose is the important thing too. Yeah, like you'd have a hedge that would be 5 or 6 feet wide anyway, at a minimum. And as I say, if they're being trimmed away annually, you've a thick outer layer on them, and you'll have a lot of blossom and a lot of fruit on those hedges. And intensive agriculture and nature can live in harmony in that manner. That's great. Thanks very much, Tony. I suppose one of the key things that we found over time is that most of our farm hedges are being cut by contractors. Tony is a bit unique in that he's cutting his own hedges. So we're just going to take a look now from the contractor's perspective with our next video clip. So we're just going to go to a video with Liam Herlihy.
We started changing the hedges from last year. We decided for the birds and the environment, we started to leave a top on the hedges, and we're delighted since we started doing that. We actually have better hedges and thicker hedges. In our hedges here, we have some trees along, and in the future we're trying to leave a white thorn or a black thorn grow up, maybe one tree every maybe 300 metres in the hedge. We haven't done that, but we're going doing it from this year on. This is our second year now, and we're trying to leave on as I call it, an air roof. And we seem to have a lot more shade in the farm, and we're getting a bit more height in the hedge and a thicker hedge since we started doing this. And this is actually very easy on the machine as well, because you're cutting a lighter hedge up on top. But give it a couple of years, it will thicken, and it'll be great for the birds and the environment. It is actually easier and faster to cut the hedge at the slope, because you can run your machine at 45-degree angle at both sides and move on. Cutting the hedges at a flat point, you have to cut them, you have to go over them 2 or 3 times to get them nice and level. For farmers, and they're trying to leave the white thorn or black thorn in the hedge, maybe every 300 metres, if they could put in a simple thing as a pigtail, to mark the ground for the driver, or a permanent thing, maybe a paling post, and have it painted. And after a few years then, you'll see the white thorn growing, and you won't need any marker because it'll stand out by itself.
I know Liam's point he said to us was that since last year he has actually convinced other farmers to do more of what we were talking about. We shall go on to the next video, which again, how do we contractors and farmers? So over to Francis's video.
We just need to get the farmers and the contractors communicating about how they want the hedges cut. My name is Francis Quigley. I'm the Machinery Specialist with Teagasc. I suppose one of the key messages that we just need to get out is that farmers and contractors need to communicate with each other in order to change the perception of what is, I suppose, a well-kept hedge. The contractor is going to do whatever you as the farmer wants done, but you just need to pick up the phone, talk to him and explain to him what you want, and he'll deliver that for you. As the contractor, I suppose one of the key things that you need to do is just to ask the farmer when he picks up the phone and asks you to come along and cut the hedges. Just ask him, what way do you want to cut? Do you need to have thorns left in your hedge, or do you need to have extra height in your hedge?
Yeah, my name is Liam Herlihy. I'm living here in Kingslandbury, County Limerick. I'm farming here all my life in this stretch of land. I'm a dairy farmer, and we started contracting back about 15 years ago, and we started out fencing, and we're doing a bit of everything today, and we're doing hedge cutting as well. And we started changing the hedges from last year. We decided for the birds and the environment, we started to leave a top on the hedges, and we're delighted since we started doing that. We actually have better hedges and thicker hedges. As a contractor, I hope the farmer and ourselves can communicate better with the layout and the cutting of the hedges, because most years we come in and there's nothing said. We just cut the hedge as the hedge has always been cut. But going forward, we're trying to hopefully that farmers will make a change and we'll talk and communicate better to where we can get stronger hedges, thicker hedges and better for the environment. And basically it's only a communication that we're lacking in, because the farmer kind of doesn't say much, just he kind of lets it to us sometimes to cut the hedge, but we're trying to change. So if we can communicate better, we'll have the change and it will be better for the environment. As a contractor, we'll cut the hedge whatever way the farmer wants, as long as we know.
Yeah, I suppose, as pointed out by Liam and myself in that video, communication is, I suppose, one of the big things that I think we need to change. And I suppose maybe the perception out there that, what is a well-kept hedge. I think, we've all have cases where, somebody has, you've seen, cut the short back and sides, and somebody comments, and God, haven't they done a lovely job on the hedges, and they're cut really tight. And I suppose even, contractors, if they go out to buy a new machine, they're going to be given nice glossy brochures by the dealer, and inevitably, most of those brochures show the machine alongside a very tightly cut hedge. So the manufacturers want to show that their machine can trim this nice tight square hedge. And I suppose our perception has kind of changed, or maybe have become that that nice neat hedge is what is seen as a well-kept hedge. I suppose the research, however, Joe, as pointed out earlier on in the week, has pointed out that the actual we have a huge number or length of hedgerow in the country, but the percentage that's actually of high quality is actually quite low. And I suppose that's where we want to maybe come to our panel today, and to just get your thoughts on how we can I suppose how we can improve and change the hedge cutting practice out there. So I might come to you first, Paraic. Paraic runs a contracting business. You might tell us a little bit about, I suppose, the hedge cutting business first, Paraic, and maybe then a little bit about how you think we can make that change.
Morning, everyone, and thanks, Francis. I run a contracting business down here in Cahir in County Tipperary. Now, I have been trying to change the technique of hedge cutting in my contracting business for my customers. As a contracting point of view, we do need to maintain our hedges, but we also need to protect them. In the practices that I'm carrying out at the moment, I'm encouraging my customers to move out electric fence wires from the base of the hedges so that I can leave a wider hedge at the base as I'm doing my annual trimming. This encourages hedge growth right down to the base of the hedge and discourages noxious weeds. Also then, it gives us a more stable hedge to continue to have a higher hedge. Now, going back to Liam, the A-topped hedge is definitely probably more advantageous, but in a lot of areas, it's not taken up by farmers. They still like the flat top hedge. Now, if that's what they need, obviously I have to agree, but I'm also encouraging them to increase the height of the hedge on a yearly basis. Now, this may be only leaving the hedge height as you cut every year up 3-4 inches, 100 centimeters, whatever. But that is continually thickening the density of the hedge by giving us a height increasing on a yearly basis. So I find that is also helping the situation, giving us a fine stock proof hedge, giving us a wider hedge at the base, and giving us a higher hedge. Also, the material that's being cut with a flail machine on a yearly basis, it's smaller. It's been blown back directly into the hedge, which is increasing the carbon pool then in the hedge as it rots and breaks down. The next type of hedge that I've come across then is the hedge that's on the way to escaping. It's not a fully escaped hedge, it's on the way to escaping. The practice that I would be encouraging for that would be coppicing. And I would have done an awful lot of this, and I've done some also some projects with Catherine on this in years gone by, where we coppice hedged and looked at them on a yearly basis from there on. It has saved those hedges. They have not gone into the escape situation, but they're now back in a situation where they can be trimmed annually or biannually and kept into a maintained hedge the way we want them. The escaped hedges, yes, there's also a percentage of those on farms as well. They tend to be a boundary hedge between maybe two farmers. We have to look after those as well. The problem that I see with the escaped hedges is in the conditions that we had, the weather conditions that we had yesterday with the storms, I find a lot of these are falling because they're top heavy. Now, what I have been encouraging is, even though they do carry and they have their own function in the environment, that we at least lighten the top of them. That would be siding them up with the circular saw and taking the heavy, narrowing the heavy head to not let them go top heavy with the risk of falling over. Once these fall over, they break out of the bank and out of the hedgerow and are gone forever. So we also have to maintain the sides of them, lighten the side of them with the circular saw, because it's a cleaner and a less invasive cut on them. So that is my way of maintaining what I find is the three types of hedgerows that I have come across. But going back a step into the coppicing, I would like to increase my introduction on that, is that it is very valuable to get these hedges in time before they go to the escape stage with the coppicing process, because that rejuvenates them and you have a hedge again for forevermore, you know. As regards roadside hedges, we do find that these hedges can be cut lower. The reason for that is for sight lines, for road traffic, buses, trucks. They like to look along over a hedge to get a view around the corner. So you do see the roadside hedges being cut lower. It may not be what people like or what the public like, but what I try and do is to leave the field side grow wider to compensate from what I'm taking from the roadside. So that helps us as well, even though we might have a low hedge, but we tend to have it wide. So that would be my take on the maintenance that I would be with every day of the week.
And I suppose, Paraic, you know, one of the things that's coming out there, I suppose, is just I suppose for the farmer to communicate to you, the way he wants the hedges cut, and I might go to you, Anya, from the IFA, just to kind of get, I suppose, your take on how we can get the farmers maybe to communicate clearer to the contractor how they want their hedges trimmed, or how we can improve.
Yeah, thanks, Francis. And it's great to see such a high level of participation and engagement in this important seminar this morning. I think from a policy perspective, Francis, we are seeing a lot more focus on our hedgerows and what needs to be done. And we're seeing that creep into, scheme requirements and that, which isn't a bad thing. Like, we have a beautiful landscape in Ireland, and our hedgerows that we take for granted here, if you go across mainland Europe, we realize that they're not as dominant over there. So I think we need to appreciate what we have. But we have kind of this image of a well-kept farm, and that would be one that has boxed hedges, low hedges, almost like a lawn of a farm, and with garden hedges. So we need to move away from that, and that will take a mindset change to letting our hedges grow a bit taller, a bit wider at the base. Look, I'm no expert in hedge cutting, so I'm learning as much here today as here, but we do need to learn from the experts on how to manage these hedges and allow for flowers and berries to prosper, which we have kind of seen being removed in the last couple of years. On the communications, yeah, I think it's really important to not only, I suppose, the farmer will come in and ask the contractor, to cut the hedges, but the contractor, if they have additional knowledge or if they have expertise, they should be willing to share them with the farmers, because it's just an annual exercise. You just ring it up the hedge cutter comes. So I think it is a knowledge exchange piece, but obviously the expertise lands with the contractors, and they should be, as Paraic said, willing to share that knowledge and educate farmers as well on how best to manage their hedges in their farm. I think what's really important is what one ecologist said to me a few years ago, was that it's easier enhance a habitat than enhance an existing habitat than maintain or create a new one. So we have to realize that these hedgerows are habitats, and they contribute to our semi-natural areas, the habitat areas. And in Ireland, we have above average semi-natural habitat areas on our farms. So we have a large quantity and a large network. On the average dairy farm, there's 6 kilometres of hedgerow. So we have large networks, as Catherine alluded to at the start, but the quality needs to be improved. So it's better to work with what we have than try to create a new one. So I think this is the opportunity, and this is the time for farmers to really put focus on their hedgerows and see what they can do better to encourage growth and renewal, and growth of flowers, growth of berries, and encourage wildlife back onto their farm, because that is becoming an important part of our social license to farm, is to encourage biodiversity back into our farms.
Thanks very much, Anya. Absolutely. No, I think it is that communication thing. In a lot of cases, it is you just pick up the phone and you do ring, or just will you come on and cut the hedges, and I suppose it's to get that engagement between both the farmer and the contractor to say, oh look, I want my hedges cut this way, and it's I suppose we need to start encouraging the farmers to spend that extra little bit of time on the phone rather than talking about the weather, talk about the hedges. So look, Denis, I might go to you next. Just the ICMSA, you might give us your thoughts on how we can improve and change the hedge cutting practice.
Good morning, everybody. Yeah, I suppose as a dairy farmer, I think we need a little bit more of understanding of, the starting point of each person and how their hedges are when they start off. Like, I mean, on my own farm here, no hedges have ever been removed, we'll say, for putting in paddocks or roadways or anything like that. We've integrated the hedges as an integral part of the paddocking system to provide shelter for biodiversity.
Dennis, you might turn off your camera for a second. We're losing you there.
All these things became the buzzwords. Shelter, most like shelter for animals. So I mean, I suppose that would have been the number one reason for the hedges on the farm before biodiversity and everything became the buzzwords. But I think if a farmer has hedges in reasonable condition and they're 6-7 foot high, it's a very small change to ask the farmer to cut those in an A shape. And you know, I think not only do you have to start with what type of hedges are on the farm, but even different parts of the country, hedges grow at an unbelievable different rate. Like I'm in the southeastern half of the country, and if you don't cut your hedges every year or every second year minimum, your hedges very rapidly become overgrown and uncontrollable, and the butt of the hedge ends up becoming very sparse and doesn't provide that shelter that we want for our livestock, and also that will create a habitat for biodiversity at the base. Whereas if you talk to people maybe in the western seaboard, cutting their hedges every 5 years, they may not even notice whether they're being cut or not. In this part of the country, ash and alder will quickly take over in a hedge and will very rapidly become unmanageable, except to get in the saw and saw everything down and create a huge problem for both farmer and contractor and for biodiversity. So I think if you look at the measures that have been brought in by different departments over the years, I mean, I was a participant in REPS for a good number of years while it was there, and we're only allowed to cut our hedges every 3 years, and it actually done huge damage to hedges because the hedges grew up very tall, very fast, and the butt went from the hedge. So you ended up with a very sparse butt in the ditch, base to the ditch, I suppose I should call it. Butt is probably a Kilkenny term, but a very sparse base in the ditch that didn't provide any shelter. And then the only remedy was to come along with a saw and saw the ditch down, and you were back in a worse position. Whereas if we're allowed to cut it every annually or biannually, that's more manageable to maintain, as Anya said, maintain and enhance what we have. So I think the departments are getting it right now at the moment. I mean, the incentive at the moment for derogation farmers to leave blackthorn every 300 meters, that's a very manageable. I'm actually on my own farm, I'm leaving a blackthorn every 100 meters because it doesn't cause a problem. I mean, you can, and you don't end up with this sparse landscape, we'll say, that Anya was talking about there. You end up with a kind of a mixture of well-kept hedges that are valuable for both shelter and biodiversity and for nesting for birds, and you have the blackthorn or the whitethorn every 100 or every 150 meters, to provide flower and seeds for birds and that. So I think, there's a happy medium with everybody. It's the same with the electric fence. You can keep the electric fence out that 2 feet from the ditch, 3 feet from the ditch. It makes it manageable for the contractor to get in behind it, to trim the ditch, to stop the electric fence from earthing. The cows will graze in underneath the electric fence to the base of the ditch, and everybody is happy. So I mean, I think if we can get practical solutions that are easily for the farmer to abide by the regulations, provided they're practical, I think farmers are more than willing to come on board and do what's necessary for the benefit of both their own farm and their own livestock and for biodiversity.
That's great. Thanks very much, Dennis. And yeah, absolutely. I think in fairness, farmers have always shown that they're willing to engage. And I suppose you're right. It's about getting it right for every location, and it does vary, as you say, around the country. Paraic, you mentioned earlier on there about the roadsides. So I was just going to go to Susan. Maybe have you any particular advice for dealing with maybe the roadside hedges and how we can best maintain those? You're on mute, Susan. You might just
Thanks, Francis. Firstly, thanks for inviting me to the seminar. I've really enjoyed the webinar over the past few days, and this morning's discussion has been very informative and has certainly highlighted the serious issues that there is in terms of decline and the extent and biodiversity quality of hedgerows and hedgerow heritage, I suppose, throughout Ireland. And ultimately, I suppose, you're talking about opportunities in terms of schemes, but there is a lack of incentive really to manage hedgerows effectively, such as, opportunities, say, through results-based schemes. But there's certainly ambition there, certainly expressed by the speakers today and throughout the past few days. ambition to work towards better hedgerow management in Ireland, and very much people pointing out that it's not about planting new hedgerows. We have an incredible hedgerow network in Ireland that needs to be managed effectively for biodiversity and also stock-proof issues for the farm, for the aesthetics, and then also for road users and road safety when they are along by a road. With respect to my own work in National Parks and Wildlife Service, I'm sitting on what's called a hedge cutting forum with Mayo County Council and farming organisations and the department there. And I suppose its focus is being on road users and health and safety, but it is a proactive initiative that Mayo County Council have pushed for, so it is a positive. But I often think that, you know, even the term or the title of the group, hedge cutting group, is the wrong name. It should be hedge management, you know, and ultimately that's what we're working towards, is management of these roadside hedges. I'm also working with the Heritage Council, and we're looking at opportunities, if there are, and I'd be interested in people's opinion on this, whether there's opportunities for certification for contractors in terms of good practice. And that's, say, for instance, that Paraic has outlined, which is really positive and encouraging to hear. And also opportunities, say, as biodiversity manuals, say, for local authorities and the roads programme and the contractors then that work to them, and perhaps again within that requirements for roads authorities for the roads programme in terms of how the contractors approach their cutting and how they cut the hedges there. So, I mean, these are things that are in the mix. So it's ultimately, it's great that this is all being highlighted today. And also, again, what's encouraging is the discussion around exchange of information, communication between the contractor, the farmer, and also in terms of road usage, the contractor and the council, which is very important, and that exchange of knowledge. I suppose where I'm coming from is ultimately biodiversity, where National Parks and Wildlife Service are coming from is biodiversity. You know, hedges are part of our natural heritage. They're also an architectural feature, I think, of the countryside. They frame the countryside, and they are the lifeblood of the countryside in Ireland, you know, delivering all sorts of ecosystem services. They're really important in terms of ecological corridors. And also very important with respect to connecting habitats, you know, wetland habitats or woodland habitats or riparian vegetation and river systems. So they really are the lifeblood of our countryside in terms of biodiversity. And I suppose I'm also coming at it, and National Parks coming at it in terms of the remit under the National Biodiversity Action Plan, where we're trying to push. I mean, where I work as an ecologist, you know, and we are statutory consultee and all sorts of things, but to mainstream biodiversity into all decision-making processes across all sectors. So again, that's going back to the councils, making sure in their roads programme that biodiversity is there as a major consideration alongside health and safety. And this is often where there can be conflict, especially with the public, where health and safety and biodiversity are seen as opposing issues. And they shouldn't be, you know, because it polarizes, in my experience, polarizes biodiversity and it becomes a negative. So health and safety and biodiversity need to be seen together, and where, again, hedgerow management is, rather than, again, back to hedge cutting, it is hedgerow management. So I suppose they're the kind of where I'm coming from with National Parks and Wildlife Service and road usage. I mean, there is also the ultimate protection of hedges, which comes under the Wildlife Act, on Section 40 of the Wildlife Act. But that can muddy the waters, I think, because that's only protecting the hedge from in terms of from the 1st of March to the end of August. So it can frame it as you can cut or do whatever you want outside that time, and I think that's the wrong message. So yes, there is restrictions with regards to Section 40 of the Wildlife Act in terms of timing, but outside that time, consideration should be very much on hedgerow management for biodiversity as well as stock proofing. And yeah, I suppose that they're the main issues I wanted to cover, and I hope that addresses. There may be specific questions though with respect to that, so I'm happy to take that.
Thanks very much, Susan. No, I think I suppose it's definitely one of the things that's, it came out of even our discussions last year and this year, that it is that communication, and as you say, management, is probably a much better term rather than hedge cutting, is critical. On that, I'm just going to go to you, Des. So again, just as we said, contractors are such a vital part, and that's why we've asked so many of you here today. So if you could give us, I suppose, your comments and views on how we can improve and change that practice.
Well, as of the last 35 or 6 years doing hedge cutting with national bodies, CSB, roadworks, there's a certain standard of hedge cutting that we would have followed from years gone by, like even going back to when we done our course with Catherine first, then the Dalton. We would have had actually farms that we had done initiatives, and what we felt was then that just maybe because we didn't get to that piece of ground, maybe, or that farm on time the following year, that the farmer turned around and he took in a contractor from another area. And when that contractor came in, he didn't actually leave the hedges the way that we had them. He actually went in and shaped the hedges again, which meant the following year the farmer come back to us, he's seen his mistake. So to me, what I would like to see is a standard of some kind of standard for hedge cutting, with possibly a CSCS card for contractors, and also I think for roadside hedges and road maintenance. I don't think there should be a contractor out there with machinery that hasn't got his sign lighting and garden course done. These are only points that I'm pointing out from the last 35 years of working. I definitely would like to see that some class of a standard that the majority of the hedges would be cut in an A-shape shape. We have followed that from day one, from we done our course. We have found a problem as well by A-shape in hedges, where if you let a hedge go high, if that hedge actually gets beyond 3 meters in width in the bottom, that hedge is classed unproductive ground. Hedges that's also meticulously maintained seems to encourage an awful lot of growth of ivy, which causes an awful lot of problems for farmers, we'd say, with top trees, this top heavy, ivy on them, the fall over, the electric fence is down. It's causing problems. There's a lot of issues, we'd say, with hedge cutting, but I think the main issue is the standard. There has to be some kind of a standard there, and that information shouldn't just be coming out to the farmer. That information should also be going to the public to state that they are allowed to maintain these hedges and to put them into A-shape. If you go around the roads, different parts of the countryside, some of them's cut, some of them's butchered, And when you see a bad hedge cut, it doesn't look pretty. It definitely doesn't look pretty. I think by getting information out to the public as well as contractors and farmers, that needs to be, it either wants to be put out on a public base or on a TV or on social media, some way like that, that this is the standard, this is what can be done. Because we have had several places where farmers has come to us and said in laneways, yeah, cut away at that hedge. But it's not actually the farmer's hedge.
Okay.
It's belonged to another landowner. You know, that's some things like that needs, so that you're right in getting the farmer to actually talk to the contractor, but also the public has to be educated a bit on it as well.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks a million, Des. All right,
Okay.
Catherine, you're going to introduce our next video, I think, before we go to the actual Q&A session. And
yeah, I just think that the cross-compliance and the BPS is of huge value to farmers, and the introduction of even the word hedgerows and management is really significant in my view. So we'll just show that for the derogation farmers now at the moment. So Yvonne is going to show the video here. Thank you.
For the first time in 2020, farmers availing of a nitrates derogation must undertake a biodiversity option relating to the management of hedges. The first option is to retain a thorn tree, either white thorn or black thorn, in every 300 metres of hedge. It can be an existing mature thorn tree, or it can be a new thorn sapling selected from within the hedge. And it may be easier to leave a bunch of saplings in the first year, which can be thinned down later to a single stem. Escaped hedges, which have grown into lines of trees, naturally contain thorn trees. Thorn trees in hedges have many benefits. They provide flowers for bees in summer and fruit for birds in autumn. Thorn trees above the body of a hedge provide perching posts for birds, allowing them hold territory. Birds do not sit on flat-topped hedges.
4 years ago we decided, as we were always topping the hedge, we would leave some of the white thorn develop and grow up. So you can see here that this is just 4 years growth, and it has during the summer it was full of flowers. And now you can see we have a nest that is up in the top part of it. While we have planted 3 kilometres of hedgerows over the last number of years here in Grange, we realised how important it is to maintain all our old hedgerows.
The second biodiversity option for derogation farmers is to cut hedges on a 3-year cycle, where it is recommended to cut 1/3 of hedges each year. Whichever option is chosen, biodiversity will benefit.
it's great, Catherine. Do you want to comment just on that video before we move on to the Q&A session? Or
Yeah, I mean, as I said, that's the most important. I love the option of the tree in the hedge. I personally prefer little and often cutting. I think the biggest problem is that farmers didn't understand that option, which is why we really need to get it out there. Even there was a question in the chat there about having all their hedges with no white thorn or black thorn. I question what is in the hedge. I think people don't realise what's in the body of the hedge, that it is black thorn and white thorn. There's hardly a hedge in the country that doesn't have it. So that's the point, and we were clearly shown there how you start off, which in Grange with doing it.
yeah, so it's a case of just picking out a spot and leaving it and letting it grow up, and eventually it will start to.
And again, Francis, I know there's comments there coming in about maybe 1 every 200 metres is very small, and that is the regulation. But personally, what I would love is if the farmers and contractors left 1 every 300 metres each year. So rather than leaving 10 this year, that'll all be the same height. What we want is a diversity of Everything's about diversity. So if we had one every 300 meters each year for the next 10 years, wouldn't that be fantastic? Because as I said, the small birds just want a meter or so above the body of the hedge. Something else will want something else. So, you know, that would be our recommendation, would be every time you cut, leave a new one.
There's another comment there. Is contracting hedge cutting regulated in any way, or can anybody become a hedge cutter if they want? Instead of just thinking of the quality and proper protection, might be compared if a person was not trained adequately. Des, you had mentioned that there. You might comment, just on your thoughts there.
If Roy's going to talk to you on that one.
Go on, yeah, thanks, Roy.
Yeah, just the standards for hedge cutting, there is none. Anybody can basically buy a tractor and hedge cutter and become a hedge cutting contractor. And what way would I put it? If you were building a house, there's a kind of a building code for putting a roof for a house. So basically we should have a code of practice for hedge cutting so that anybody that wants to get into the industry, they know what they have to do and know what they're looking at when it comes to cutting a hedge. A lot of people just think it's a matter of cutting it back, keeping it tight and tidy. That meets all standards for, say, Department of Agriculture, say for any of the environment schemes, that they keep the thing right and tidy. So that's why there's a lot of hedge cutters being bought and sold at the minute. And everybody that's getting into it, they should have more training and more knowledge of what they're doing when it comes to having a hedge cutter. It's not just a matter of buying one and becoming a hedge cutting contractor.
Anyone else want to comment on that? Or
I'm just wondering how this would be done, or how you would have certification then of contractors. What would be the best way of doing it? Just
well, myself and Dad, we've actually done our training with Teagasc. It's a right few years ago now with Catherine. There was probably a group of maybe 30 contractors at the time did do it. It was to help us with the understanding of hedge cutting for the rep schemes. It was very beneficial, absolutely. We understood when we looked at a hedge what species we were looking at, what they were looking, and the standard that they wanted. But that was okay for us as contractors on that day doing that course. But the farmers that we were working for, they had no education as to what standard they needed to get their hedges cut to. So it was basically left up to the contractor to do the work. And that was how some of the farmers in the country has become educated, was through the contractors that has done these courses. But it needs to be more out there for every contractor or anybody that wants to do hedge cutting, that they should have this basic training course done so that they understand what they're actually doing with a hedge.
Okay, I see Denis, you have your hand up there.
Thanks, Francis. I suppose the big thing here is, and a lot of it is happening at the moment, is a lot of farmers are being educated on this, after being pushed in a certain direction to use every possible square inch of land in the country for the last 60 years by a cap policy, and now we're being asked to go into full reverse and go the opposite direction. But there is great work being carried out, like by Teagasc and other agencies with derogation courses and educating farmers on, with say nutrient management, biodiversity, all those kind of things. So I think Des and Roy are very right in Paraic and what they're saying, like that the contractor does what the farmer demands. And it's hard for a contractor to come in and tell a farmer what way he should be cutting his hedges. But I think the reverse is happening as well, that the farmer is being educated and the farmer is going to put demands on the contractor. And if the contractor won't carry out what the farmer wishes to be done, he'll soon move on to another contractor. And I think that, we can't turn around 60 years of policy overnight, but it certainly is turning around. And as I said earlier on, like, I think if the rules and regulations are what's manageable and what's possible for farmers to do and make sense, they'll be greeted with open arms by farmers.
Paraic, yeah, go ahead. You're just gone on mute, Paraic. Sorry, you were. Yeah.
Sorry, Francis. Yes, I was also on that course with Des in Kildalton there with Catherine and her team, and I found it very helpful in educating us to be able to go to the farmer and help educate them. But another point that I'd just like to make on that is I've done a couple of sample projects with Catherine afterwards where we've done some demonstrations, and they're actually for some of the Teagasc staff to help everyone to recognise what was needed in relation to coppicing and hedgerow management. So I would be all for maybe a few projects like that set up again to take out maybe certain groups of farmers that may be on a course and to show them practically on a sample job, and inviting a contractor, a certified contractor like myself or Des, to do the operation. And I think that will show them and give them the practical and give them the actual, see it in front of them happening. And I think that would be maybe a point worth taking note of for the future.
Absolutely, no, I think that's a great idea. Tony, your hand is up there as well. I might bring you in there.
Yeah, thanks, Francis. Yeah, look, with regard to the standard of hedge cutting or regulation, as to best practice, I think the best hope we have of getting results on that is the direction should come from the farmers themselves, and Des made the point there, made it very well. That if the contractor won't do what you ask him to do, you will soon move on, you'll find another contractor. Even I found there in the last 12 months since those videos were produced by yourself and Catherine, I've met numerous people that, have seen those videos and have, it has made them think a little more about the way they were cutting their hedges. It was only the case of pick up the phone, make the phone call, tell him cut the hedges whenever he got the chance there. That was it, that was as far as the conversation went. But I think people are starting to, cop onto the idea now that, there's a little bit more to it than just telling the contractor to come on and cut the hedges, And if we could change the mindset of the people that own the hedges and are giving the directions to the contractor, it'll be a kind of a domino effect that, when a neighbouring farmer will see what's going on, next door, they'll say, yeah, do you know what, that's quite nice, or, that's something I could do on my farm, and I think that that's the way this needs to go, probably through a little bit of education. I also think that the new CAP has missed a golden opportunity, in the eco schemes, that there was huge potential there, maybe to encourage proper management and I suppose encourage more hedgerows and general awareness around hedges and reward farmers for best practice, and to be a win-win situation all around. On the 3-year cycle of cutting hedges, and I think it was Denis made the point there earlier on, that to something I found myself, that when you go back cutting a hedge after 3 years, I think you're doing more harm than good. It's very hard on to bring a hedge back down to where you want it. As I said, like you're leaving a lot of exposed timber, and it's cut at a time of the year where the water will infiltrate those stumps that are left. You have a lot of debris on the floor of the embankment. Whereas, like the point I was making earlier on, if you had maybe one side of a field where you'd let that hedge grow up into an A shape, where it would flower every year and bear fruit every year, and that the birds could depend on it, that's fairly secure nesting area, whatever, I think that might be more beneficial. Maybe that's just my own thoughts on it. And I think just Paraic made the point earlier on as well about keeping a wide base. Guys are keeping the fences too close to the ditches where you can't drop the hedge or the head of the hedge cutter down inside it without skinning the bank. To keep out the fences a couple of feet, and you're creating this thin space to it. You're going to restrict the growth of ragwort and thistles and whatever. You won't have to use as much sprays around by the boundaries either. So I think that was a good point that was made earlier on as well. Okay, thanks, Frank.
Thanks very much, Tony. Catherine, do you want to come in there now?
Yeah, I'm just wondering if Liam, do you want to make your comment? If not, I'll make it. You've sent it to me. Just try your comment. Talking there, Liam. No, maybe not. What Liam has said is farmers, again, I think maybe somebody else mentioned as well, should come to see hedges being cut as part of a demonstration and discussion groups to show them the value of, best practice management. So listen, Francis, I've been trying to keep an eye on the chat. I've grouped them into a couple of areas, and maybe you can have a look and see what I'm missing. And please keep the answers short. We want to get through as many as we can, and possibly just go to the one person. Susan, can I come to you there? Well, perhaps I'll explain it first. The questions are just show the variety, the two sides to the story. I think you're seeing that half the questions are, why are we cutting it all? You shouldn't be cutting, and then other people the opposite side. So I think, and that to me, and I know talking to the contractors during the week, is we really need to get the message out, because they are being abused for cutting hedges, and on the other side we're trying to cut them right. So again, yeah, we need clearer messaging. I'm going to come on to communications, but let me just quickly go to Susan as to okay, we're all happy with the escaped hedge there. If you want to leave it alone, that's fine. But for the ones that are topped, and we're talking about this A-shaped hedge, Susan, why is that done right? I think our problem is it's been done, butchered gives everything a bad name. But that picture I showed in the beginning of the 15-foot triangular shaped hedge that is topped, Susan, tell us the advantage of that.
Well, I mean, I suppose you've just touched on, but the big one really is to have as much diversity as possible. So there is for the A shape there, ideally you would have as wild as possible, but the A shaped in terms of road usage, I suppose, and where there are roads and safety issues, certainly they would be appropriate there. They give height, they give structure, and they give robustness to the hedge, and that allows it to be stock-proof and also ecological corridor. So certainly where it has a function, quite a strong function, multifunction, then that A shape is appropriate. But certainly in terms of allowing a hedge to be wilder and unruly, that is also an important consideration in certain parts of the farm as well. So,
yeah.
Again,
we want both.
Yes.
But that 15-foot hedge that's topped and managed appropriately does have bird nesting, doesn't it? And providing it has the flowering thorns, it has certain advantages over the fully escaped hedge because it has that lovely dense base.
Yeah, and you would have those mature trees within that hedge as well, which is very important. And personally, the more of those, the better to closer if possible, to provide those perching posts and to provide diversity within that A-shaped hedge.
So we want both hedges, and we want farmers and contractors to cut the hedges, that topped hedge, but in the right way. I think that's the next step. And coming on to the communications, and if everybody, it just takes the point out of it, the whole lot of things, how can we get farmers to value the hedges more? And the comment about them being penalised under BPS, where the hedges, you know, for not for the hedge now, but for the hedge coming out into the field, just negative, you know, scrub areas we're talking about there, that they do get penalised, redlined. How can you communicate to the wider public, to whom farmers, in my own work, I always keep saying farmers think contractors know best. Contractors have to do, rightly so, what the farmer is asking them to do, because they're doing the work for them, and they're all doing what they think the neighbour wants. So how do we get them neighbour in the wider community? How do we communicate there? And a question again on communication about county council sending out letters to farmers to cut their hedges without any, you know, more guidance of best practice. So just communication, 20 seconds from anybody who has a comment on an idea. How do we communicate better to any of those groups?
Just on, Catherine, just on the eligible areas and the fact that farmers have, you know, non-productive land has been excluded from BPS payments in the last cap and caps before. They are trying to rectify that through a looser definition of the eligible hectare going forward, that up to 30% of your parcel can be non-productive. So hopefully that'll help that argument a little bit better. But yes, it has been a contradiction that, you know, non-productive land has been seen as ineligible for single farm payments. And that has encouraged this you know, keeping maximizing productive land and keeping non-productive land to a minimum, which is a pity. So there is a little bit of change in the next cap on that, on the definition of an eligible hectare.
Okay, so but the hedges themselves, just to be clear, because sometimes there's confusion there, are eligible and are being paid on. So how do we communicate? Any other comments on communicating with any of those groups? Denis?
I think, Catherine, if you encourage, like I would say, there's an awful lot of I would say courses being run for derogation farmers. That's going to be extended as the rules and regulations drop down and include more farmers. You've an awful lot of, would say, Teagasc and private advisors, and I don't see why, you know, if there's a farm walk or a discussion group meeting that's going on for 2 hours, I don't see why 5 minutes of that can't be dedicated to enhancing biodiversity. And, you know, at a topical point of the year, maybe coming into September, October, November, why there can't be a 20-minute discussion on hedgerow management and what's best for everybody when it comes to hedgerow management. So I think there's ample opportunity that farmers are gathering together with advisors and in groups, with discussion groups and derogation courses and whatever. So I think that's a great, where you have a captive audience. That's a great opportunity to say, well, look, at your hedge doesn't have to be cut in a certain way. I suppose, as I said already, we've probably had 40 or 50 years of being told we have to do it in a certain way. But as Aine has said there, the opportunities are there now, and we do have probably maybe an opportunity to not have non-productive areas that we will still be paid on. So that obstacle hopefully has been removed. But I think the communication piece is where you have either derogation courses or discussion groups, that, you know, a small section of those meetings be dedicated to hedgerow management.
Yeah, so we all agree communication is more, but I think this group needs to work more at all different ideas on that. Paraic, just another question when you have the floor there, because I just want to ask you about, are there minimum sight lines, and any comment on that, you know, when you're cutting on roadsides?
There's a few around the safety, isn't there, Catherine, just on prosecution, that farmers are being warned as well. So maybe just to broaden that out a little bit.
Great.
And some of the sight lines would be site specific in relation to the road or the access to the road, coming from a farmyard or coming from a T-junction or a forecast road. A lot of it would be site specific in relation to that. You would, to give maybe, you know, the proper meters of you to get around the corner or whatever. You know what I mean? So a lot of it, that would be site specific, really.
That presume you would agree that shouldn't be used as an excuse to cut everything inside. It should be common sense.
It should be common sense.
Safety first, but only when it's
Yes.
For safety. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
There
And in
is.
relation to communication there as well, as regards a contractor point of view, like a lot of our certified contractors around the country have good work done in hedgerows. I know we may not be where we need to be in relation to hedgerows, but there is an awful lot of good work being done by our certified contractors throughout the country that has helped keep what hedgerows we have alive in this country. And as regards communication within contractors, we have our organisations, example FCI, that we can communicate through our support group and through our organisation in relation to giving out information to other contractors. Thanks.
Back to you, Francis.
No, it was the comment on the sightlines. I suppose it does vary, even from county council to county council, and from location, it could be anything from 52 meters on a small by road up to maybe 200 meters or more, so it will vary.
Just a question I'm taking for granted that the nesting season, you are all conscious of that and keeping to the nesting season. So I think we need to, other than I may not have mentioned it. How far out should the electric fence be? Put a figure on it, lads.
Meter.
The electric fence out from the bottom of the hedge, probably at least 2 foot to give way for the machine and whatever obstacles can be at the bottom of the hedge. Depends on the hedge and the location. Say county by county can be different. For us here on County Monaghan, we work with a lot of limestone area. So a lot of the bottoms of the hedges could have been previously built with limestone rocks, and there's white thorn hedge growing in it. And over the years, the stones has kind of tumbled out a bit from the hedge. So we would say roughly about 2 foot from the bottom.
Any up on 2 foot, Tony? What would you say?
Catherine?
Yes.
Yeah. Look, anywhere from 2 to 3 feet would be plenty sufficient, where you can drop down the head inside the wire and you're not shaving the ditch, I would think that's sufficient anyway.
That's grand. Francis, have we missed any? I know this, I'm trying to group them like you. A lot of comments about tillage. Is tillage, who's working in tillage areas that, it seems to be a kind of a more negative coming in about tillage side of it. Any comment from somebody in the tillage? And just the other one then about the coppicing, Des, if you're going to take that one again because of where you're working maybe. And the ones I would love to see coppiced are the upside down toilet brush hedges that are a stump, and we're never going to get the dense space back into that unless it's, I'm very loath to coppice any of the escaped hedges. Done right, it can be done, but the ones I think I'd love to target, and just a comment on that, Des, because I know you've done some work on that, or Rye.
Yes, I did. Yeah, we done a day's course over here with farmers on a farm, and when we went in and cut as low as we could with the circular saw to do that. But then there was also another man there he went into the hedge and he actually cut it right back, clean right down to the bank. We couldn't reach right down to the very bottom, but he did clean it down to the very bottom. Now, I have seen those hedges in years after that, and they are very dense hedges. They're not that wide, but they're very dense because they were taken back down to complete ground level, and an electric fence put up each side of them. Now they can be maintained back to just, you're actually keeping the fence clear, but it's still a good dense hedge.
That's the one that you can really get the triangular shape into, I think.
Correct, yes.
And ideally then up to 15 foot. I think sometimes we've rejuvenated and then haven't followed on with letting it grow back up, which it would be good for biodiversity and carbon. Yeah, okay.
Sorry, just those hedges probably at the moment now at the base is about 2 meters wide at the base, but they are very, very dense.
Yeah, no, I think we'll have to wrap it up. We're gone well over our time, but I just wanted to say thanks a million to everybody. Like Joe, it's been a fantastic, I suppose, discussion and debate about how we can improve things. I suppose it's very important that we acknowledge all the good work that is being done. Like Joe, there is an awful lot of very good operators out there, like Joe, and I suppose it's just to encourage you, I suppose, to spread the word and help to I say get others, so that's, in any way you can, just to improve the communication, as I say, between yourselves and the farmers, or between the farmers and yourselves. I think it's very important that we just try and help to that we all do our best to try and improve the standards of the hedgerows, ourselves included, so I think we can wrap it up there. Catherine, have you any last words just to say?
Just tomorrow's is about the food from hedges and foraging, so a lovely topic, and join us then. And Friday we're talking about the native provenance of planting our hedge stock. No, thank you again. Thank you very much. Thanks, Francis and Yvonne in the background. Thank you very much.
Thanks everyone for joining us.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thanks.